The Zelvari flagship hung suspended in the deep silence of space, its massive hull casting a shadow over the small moon-like asteroid it orbited. Commander Karnak stood at the helm of his warship, his arms folded behind his back as he stared at the star-filled expanse through the viewport. His sharp, angular face remained unreadable, his gold-colored eyes narrowing as he observed the slowly revolving space debris outside. This was the edge of Zelvari-controlled space, the uncharted region where the galaxy's maps faded into unknown voids. For decades, this area had been a dead zone, unexplored and abandoned, marked only by scattered debris from the few vessels that had dared venture into its depths. But now, something had changed. A long-forgotten human warship, the Yuichen Valiant, had appeared on his scanners, drifting aimlessly through the cold, lifeless void. It had no markings, no clear origin, no history in the archives. It was completely uncharted, its last known activity a mystery, its crew long absent. Karnak's voice rang out across the dark command deck. "What is this?" The voice of his sensor officer crackled through the bridge. "Commander, we've found something strange. A human warship, floating in uncharted space. It's still operational, but it doesn't belong here. No known records of its movement. It shouldn't be here." Karnak tilted his head slightly, considering the report. Humans, with their crude technology and short lifespans, rarely left remnants of their fleets that lasted long in the harsh depths of space. Ships like this should have decayed, broken down, or drifted into oblivion. Yet here it was, unmarked, alone, and still alive. "Still operational?" Karnak mused aloud. "Impossible. The human vessels we encountered years ago were primitive. There's no way they could have maintained a ship of that caliber for this long." He turned to his officers. "Prepare the boarding party," he ordered, his voice cold and commanding. "We'll investigate." The Zelvari officers exchanged uncertain glances. There was something unsettling about this discovery, and Karnak could feel it in his bones. It was too quiet, too strange. His instincts, refined by years of warfare and command, told him something was off. He couldn't place it. But something wasn't right. Karnak had faced countless challenges over the years. His fleet had torn through entire human colonies in the past, leaving nothing but dust and broken ships in their wake. The humans had been easy prey. But this was different. A long-forgotten warship from a dead fleet, still intact, with no survivors, no signal, and no explanation. It was impossible. Yet here it was, waiting to be discovered. "What do we know about this ship?" Karnak pressed. A technician flicked through his data screen, his fingers moving rapidly. "It's a warship of the Yuichen class, Commander. A vessel designed for long-range combat, armed with heavy cannons, long-range missiles, and extensive defense systems. The last recorded movement was over 20 years ago. No other ships have reported its disappearance." Karnak's sharp features tensed as he absorbed the information. "Prepare the boarding party. Bring a full team, and make sure the shuttle is armed. No taking chances." His officers quickly began their preparations, setting the course for the drifting ship. But Karnak stood for a moment longer, staring out into the empty space where the ship lay. There was something about this stray human vessel that seemed too perfect, too quiet. He could feel it. The sense that something was waiting for him. The tension was palpable as the Zelvari warship maneuvered slowly toward the derelict vessel, now clearly in their sights. It was hard to believe it had just been drifting for so long, alone, abandoned. A ship that was never meant to be found. Karnak's unease grew with every passing moment. There were too many questions and no answers. When the boarding party arrived and stepped onto the empty human ship, Karnak knew one thing for sure: this was no ordinary mission. It wasn't just about retrieving a lost relic. It was about discovering what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edges of space, to the fringes of their existence. And if that human ship had survived so long in the dead of space, it was a question Karnak intended to answer. The Zelvari flagship was a fortress of cold precision. Its towering walls hummed with life as Gorvax stood near the observation window, his gaze fixed on the stars beyond. The faint glow of distant suns flickered against the ship's hull, a contrast to the chaos the Zelvari had just caused in the galaxy. It was a routine mission, or at least it had seemed that way. The human prisoner, still shackled to his seat, had long since been subdued. His resistance had been broken, and the Zelvari believed they had won. Yet, despite his injuries, the human's eyes were still filled with a strange, defiant spark, one that neither Gorvax nor his people could fully understand. They're so fragile. Tilrax, his second in command, sneered as he surveyed the prisoner. How do they survive in this galaxy? They can't even breathe properly on most planets. Gorvax turned, his golden eyes narrowing. Explain. Tilrax grinned. They live on a primitive, hostile world. Earth, a place that should have wiped them out millennia ago. Too many predators, too much instability. It's a death trap for any other species. Gorvax nodded slowly, his claws tapping against the control panel in front of him. He'd always seen humans as weak, their biology imperfect, outclassed by the many superior species in the galaxy. Yet, despite their inherent disadvantages, they were still here. The alien commanders had wiped out so many human fleets, scattered their colonies, and captured their leaders. And yet, somehow, they always kept coming back. It was a never-ending cycle of resistance, survival, and defiance. And Gorvax didn't understand it. They shouldn't even be here, he muttered. How are they still alive? Tilrax's voice was low and mocking. They are weak, Commander. It's simple biology. They have no claws, no natural armor. Their bodies break easily under pressure. Their bones fracture. Their muscles tear. They need food constantly, water more than most other species, he scoffed, turning to the prisoner. Your kind can barely survive outside their tiny atmosphere. No real defenses, no natural gifts. You're soft, fragile, and slow. A single plasma shot can end you. The human didn't react. His eyes remained focused and calm, despite the sharp words and contempt directed at him. Gorvax studied the prisoner for a moment. The human's face was bloodied and bruised, his clothes shredded from earlier interrogations, yet he remained silent. Tilrax leaned in. Do you even know how weak you are? How absurd it is for your species to even try and fight back. You're nothing more than an insect. A nuisance. The human's eyes flickered up. A faint smirk tugged at the corner of his lips. You keep thinking that, he muttered, his voice low but steady. Tilrax's frills flared in irritation, and he moved closer to the prisoner, towering over him. What's so funny? You're outmatched. Outnumbered. Your species is nothing compared to ours. We dominate the galaxy. You're an anomaly, a mistake. But the prisoner simply shrugged, unfazed by Tilrax's aggression. We're still here, aren't we? The words were quiet, but they carried weight. The Zelvari froze, the harsh truth hanging in the air. We've fought. We've lost. We've endured. We've survived. The prisoner's voice grew stronger with each word. And we will keep fighting. There was a brief silence, one that seemed to stretch on forever. The aliens on the bridge shifted uncomfortably, their attention drawn to the human who, despite his injuries, still seemed to have an unshakable resolve. How could that be? Gorvax's mind churned with confusion, and an unsettling thought began to take root. How were the humans still alive? Tilrax leaned closer. You're nothing compared to us. We've dominated species for eons. We've wiped out civilizations far greater than yours. The prisoner's smile never wavered. You don't get it, do you? You think we're weak because we break, because we bleed, because we die. But that's exactly what makes us stronger. His words echoed around the room. The Zelvari were confused, unsettled. Gorvax raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? The prisoner finally looked up, locking eyes with him, his voice low but filled with purpose. We're not strong because we're perfect. We're strong because we survive, because we adapt, because we never give up, even when the odds are impossible. A soft chuckle escaped him, one that sent a shiver down the spines of the Zelvari officers. That's why we're still here, and that's why we'll never stop fighting. And for the first time, Gorvax felt a flicker of doubt in his mind. Had he miscalculated? The interrogation chamber was filled with a heavy, almost suffocating silence as Commander Krex stood with his arms folded, watching the human prisoner in front of him. The man was exhausted, bruised, and bloodied, yet there was something about his unbowed spirit that grated against everything Krex had ever believed. The human had been captured weeks ago, a soldier from a small rebel faction on a distant world. But he was no ordinary prisoner. His resistance, his sheer will to survive despite the endless torture, had become an anomaly that even the Zelvari Empire had trouble explaining. Krex had ordered everything. Every pain, every punishment to break this human. And yet nothing worked. The human didn't scream. He didn't beg. He simply endured. Krex had seen the strongest alien warriors fall under much less intense torture. He had watched his own subordinates fail to endure even half of what this prisoner had been subjected to. And yet, the humans still stood tall. "Why won't you break?" Krex asked, his voice laced with frustration. The human's head lifted slightly, and for the first time, he met Krex's gaze directly. His eyes were bloodshot, but unwavering. "Because I can take it." Krex stepped forward, his mandibles clicking in irritation. "You're strong, human, but you can only endure for so long. Eventually, you will break. Everyone breaks." The human's lips twitched into a grin, a sharp, knowing smile that seemed out of place given the circumstances. "Maybe. But not today." Krex's temper flared. He gestured sharply to one of the nearby guards. "Increase the pressure." The guard nodded, stepping forward to activate the next phase of the interrogation. A pulse of energy surged through the chair, designed to disrupt the human's nervous system. A shocking burst of electricity hit the prisoner, but he barely flinched. His body twitched, but the only sound was the deep, strained inhale of breath. Krex stood over him, eyes narrowed, waiting for the expected response, the scream, the begging. Instead, the human exhaled slowly, unbothered. "Is that all you've got?" he rasped. The response was enough to rattle Krex. This wasn't normal. No one had ever withstood this much. The prisoners he had tortured in the past, be they alien or human, cracked under less. He signaled for more intensity. The electric shocks increased, coursing through the human's body in waves of excruciating force. The prisoner's muscles tensed violently, but his face remained stoic. His eyes never left Krex's. Krex growled under his breath. "Impossible." The human was pushed to the edge of consciousness, his body unable to handle any more of the torture. His chest rose and fell rapidly, but his spirit remained unbroken. Another surge of energy. This time, the human gritted his teeth, his jaw clenching tightly, but he didn't cry out. And that was when Krex realized this wasn't a human being. This was something more. Something that refused to surrender. "Why do you keep fighting?" Krex asked, his voice rough now. He was no longer just interrogating the human, he was trying to understand. The prisoner took a ragged breath, sweat beading across his forehead, but the grin never wavered. "Because I don't know how to stop." Krex's mind raced. What kind of species were these humans? They were supposed to be weak, fragile, primitive, no match for the mighty Zelvari. And yet, they kept coming. They refused to break. Krex's frustration mounted, but he saw something else beginning to grow inside him. Unease. "This isn't just about survival for you, is it?" Krex murmured, more to himself than to the prisoner. "You don't fight to live. You fight for something else." The human's smile widened, just slightly, but the response was clear. "We fight for each other." The words hit Krex with the force of a blow. For the first time, he saw the human's strength, not in his physical endurance, but in his ability to hold on to something bigger than himself. This wasn't a single soldier fighting for his life. This was a species that fought for each other. And that was something the Zelvari had never encountered before. Krex stepped back, his mind buzzing with the implications. He couldn't understand how it was possible for a species to keep going like this. A species so fragile, yet so unbreakable in spirit. There was something else that fueled these humans, something beyond biology. And it was that something that Krex would come to fear. The tension on the Zelvari flagship reached a climax that no one had anticipated. The final wave of human warships had emerged from warp, and now, it was clear, this was no coincidence. The Zelvari fleet had been expecting a retreat. They had been expecting a defeated human race, ready to bow to their superior might. Instead, they had found themselves on the receiving end of a force unlike anything they had encountered before. Gorvax stood rigid on the bridge, his claws clenched into fists, his breath shallow. The human fleet was not running, not retreating. They had no intention of fleeing. Instead, the human ships closed in with terrifying precision, swarms of them appearing out of nowhere, like shadows in the void, ready to strike, their weapons hot. Each ship carried with it a relentless will to survive, something that couldn't be measured by technology, strength, or numbers. "All units, prepare for battle!" Gorvax shouted, his voice rising in frustration and disbelief. "No mercy, no hesitation. They will fall before us." Yet, as the order was given, he watched in horror. The human fleet didn't scatter. They didn't hesitate to engage. They came straight for them. The Zelvari ships fired their first shots, plasma beams and railgun rounds shooting across the dark expanse of space, a deadly storm meant to obliterate the small, fragile humans. But the humans didn't retreat. Instead, they fought with a wild ferocity, charging straight into the storm of alien fire. Zelvari officers stared in disbelief as one of the human ships took a direct hit, its hull bursting in a brilliant flash of light. But rather than retreating or collapsing, the ship used the explosion's momentum to spin around and fire another barrage, crippling a Zelvari destroyer in the process. "Impossible!" an officer shouted. "Their ships are taking damage and still pushing forward." The human fleet didn't stop. Even as their ships tore apart, even as their engines failed, their shields shattered, they kept fighting, relentlessly, refusing to fall back. The human tactics were insane. No alien race would dare to use such reckless abandon. Their ships were outgunned, outnumbered, and outmatched in every way. Yet they pressed on, their weapons targeting weak points and exploiting any opening they could find. Gorvax felt the floor beneath him shake as another Zelvari warship exploded into nothing. The damage was increasing by the second. More Zelvari ships were destroyed, but the humans, despite their damage, refused to stop. "How are they still moving?" a stunned officer asked. "Why won't they stop?" Gorvax's eyes narrowed. He could feel it now, the shift in the tide. The humans were not fighting for themselves. They weren't fighting to survive or to escape. They were fighting for each other. A human ship took a direct hit to its engines, the explosion sending a shockwave through the bridge, but instead of falling apart, it used the momentum of the blast to charge forward and slam into an alien cruiser. The impact was brutal, but the humans didn't stop. Gorvax had fought in dozens of campaigns, seen whole species crumble under pressure, but he had never seen anything like this. Humans didn't break, they didn't surrender, and worst of all, they didn't fear death. It wasn't that the humans were stronger than the Zelvari, or that their weapons were more advanced. No, the true strength of the humans was something far more dangerous: their relentless will. Humans didn't just survive the impossible, they embraced it, they welcomed it. And in that moment, Gorvax realized something. He had never truly understood what humanity was. His entire life, he had seen them as nothing, weak, fragile, desperate. But now, with every human ship that kept coming, with every human death that didn't break them, he knew that he had gravely underestimated them. He had made one fatal mistake: he had thought humanity was weak. But now, as he watched the humans tear through his fleet, fearless, he realized humans were not weak. They were inevitable. They were a force that could not be stopped, no matter what odds they faced. No matter how much they suffered, how many ships they lost. They would always keep fighting, always push forward, until the galaxy itself had no choice but to recognize their power. The alien fleet was faltering, shattered, and broken, while the humans, even battered and bloodied, kept coming, relentless, unstoppable. The human fleet, though damaged, refused to retreat. Each warship, battered and barely holding together, continued to charge forward, moving with a reckless determination that left the Zelvari officers in disbelief. There was no fear, no hesitation. Every human vessel, even the ones that had taken catastrophic damage, kept fighting, kept moving. A Zelvari cruiser exploded in a massive burst of light as it collided with a human ship, its guns discharging wildly as the explosion wiped it from existence. And yet, another human warship appeared in its place, pressing forward with brutal precision. Commander Gorvax gripped the edge of his command console, his claws digging into the metal as he watched the chaos unfold. The Zelvari fleet was losing, and they had no idea how to stop the human onslaught. The human ships had been forced to fight in ways that made no tactical sense, splitting their forces, charging straight into enemy lines, and taking damage, but never stopping. They were unpredictable and fiercely determined. "Why won't they fall back?" Tilrax yelled, voice rising in panic. "They're being destroyed! Why won't they stop?" Gorvax's throat frills flared with frustration. He could hear the disbelief in Tilrax's voice. Even the Zelvari, known for their relentless focus and calculated strategies, couldn't understand how humans were able to continue despite overwhelming odds. A human ship, barely more than a wreck, slammed into the side of a Zelvari destroyer, its weapons still firing as it crumpled the enemy ship's hull. The sheer brutality of the humans' approach was unlike anything the Zelvari had ever seen. Tilrax stepped forward, his voice cracking with a mixture of awe and terror. "This is madness! They're fighting like beasts, like they have nothing left to lose!" Gorvax watched as a human destroyer, its engines smoking, Half of its weapons systems fried, fought tooth and nail, taking down Zelvari warships one by one. The bridge officers were now completely silent, all eyes glued to the screens. They had never witnessed anything like this before. The humans were relentless, refusing to succumb to the inevitable. Even when they took a hit that should have destroyed them, they kept going, the wreckage just a momentary obstacle. Gorvax clenched his teeth. How are they still moving? The human fleet continued its assault, each damaged ship fighting until it couldn't fight anymore. Even when one fell, another would take its place, a cycle of life, death, and more life. The Zelvari fleet, now reduced to a fraction of its original strength, scrambled to regroup. Nothing was working. The human warships, those that were still standing, pushed forward with the full fury of a species that had learned to survive against all odds. And then it happened. A human battleship, severely damaged, its outer hull barely intact, launched its last assault. It fired a single, devastating shot that hit a Zelvari flagship. The flagship took the hit, and for the first time in the battle, the Zelvari were staggered. The final blow wasn't delivered by superior firepower or technology. It came from the sheer will to survive. The human ship, tattered and battered, fought on because it had no other choice. Gorvax stood frozen for a moment, watching his fleet's destruction unfold before him. The human fleet wasn't just surviving, they were dominating. The prisoner's voice echoed in his mind. You thought we were weak. You thought we were alone. You were wrong. Gorvax gritted his teeth, unable to tear his eyes away from the screens. His fleet was on the verge of collapse, and the humans were unstoppable. As the last human warship, a wreck, launched its final assault, Gorvax understood. This was no longer a battle. It was a massacre. The Zelvari were the prey, and the humans were the hunters. The battle had ended, but the war was not over. The once proud Zelvari fleet now limped away, broken and battered, with only a handful of ships remaining intact. Their arrogance, their belief in superiority, had been shattered in a matter of hours, as humanity's unexpected and relentless ferocity tore through them like a storm. The remaining Zelvari ships turned tail, fleeing into the stars with their tail between their legs. But they weren't escaping to safety. They were running from a nightmare that had become all too real. The galaxy had changed that day, and the Zelvari knew it. Commander Gorvax sat alone in his command chair, his gaze locked onto the viewport. The battlefield was silent now, the vast emptiness of space unnervingly quiet after the chaos of the battle. But for Gorvax, the silence was deafening. He replayed every moment of the battle in his mind, unable to escape the images of the human ships, battered and seemingly broken, yet never giving up. Each strike, each move, each unrelenting assault, they had fought like something else. Humans weren't supposed to be like this. They weren't supposed to stand their ground when they were outnumbered. They weren't supposed to keep coming, even when their ships were torn apart, their crew members dead, their systems failing. Yet they had. Gorvax's claws dug into the armrests of his chair, his mind racing. He had faced countless enemies, beasts, conquerors, warlords, but never had he met something like humanity. They had broken his fleet. They had made him fear them. A soft sound interrupted his thoughts, a movement from the corner of the room. It was the human prisoner. After everything, after the battle, the carnage, the human was still alive. His arms were still shackled, his body still battered, but his gaze was clear. His smile had never wavered. Gorvax didn't turn to face him immediately. Instead, he sat there, eyes focused on the vast emptiness of space, as if he could somehow escape the weight of the realization that had settled deep in his chest. The human spoke. You didn't expect this, did you? Gorvax's jaw clenched. You should be dead. The human's eyes glinted with something sharp, something dark. But we're not. The words hung in the air, echoing through the bridge. Humans were not dead. They had survived, and they had made it clear that nothing would break them. Gorvax stood up suddenly, his eyes narrowing. He could feel his anger rising, but deep down, something far worse was rising in him. Fear. Fear that humanity was not just some fleeting species. Fear that they weren't just survivors. Fear that humanity was inevitable. The human prisoner tilted his head, taking in the warlord's discomfort, his smile widening. You keep thinking that it was luck, that we were just lucky to be here today. The prisoner's voice was quiet, almost conspiratorial. But it wasn't. It never is. Gorvax's eyes flicked to the displays. The human fleet, still intact, still standing tall against the retreating Zelvari ships. You fight to survive, and you do it well. The prisoner's voice was almost reverent now. But that's not why we fight. We fight because we can never stop. Gorvax stared at him, the weight of the words sinking deep into his chest. He had underestimated them. The human had never broken. Not when they were in chains, not when they were surrounded, not when their ships were torn apart by superior forces. He had thought they were weak. He had thought they were just another species, insignificant, fragile, out of place. But now, he saw the truth. We don't know how to lose, the human continued, his grin still wide. And the galaxy is about to learn that. Gorvax's breath caught in his throat. Fear. Fear for his empire, for his people, for the future. The same fear that had struck him when he first saw the human fleet refuse to die. The human prisoner stood tall now, walking toward the exit, past the terrified officers who had once seen him as nothing but a captive. He didn't acknowledge them, didn't glance in their direction. His every step was one of certainty, as if he had already won. The doors opened for him, and as he passed through, he turned back. The galaxy will never look at humanity the same way again. Gorvax's heart pounded in his chest as the doors closed behind the human. He had lost, and in the process, the galaxy had just learned that humanity was no longer the underdog. They were the future, the inevitable.